Hi, Brian. Good morning here from Montreal. How are you today?
I'm doing very well. Good morning.
Yeah, super happy to have you here on this Papa PhD live recording, live conversation for the podcast. We are live now. I verified. I checked on LinkedIn and YouTube. Things seem to be going well. If anyone is watching, please share a comment with us saying if everything's okay. The video, the audio. My mic has been. I changed mics and it was kind of low the other a couple of weeks ago. So if you can tell us also, are the mic levels okay? That'd be great. If not, we are going to go on to today's conversation about PhD to consulting space with Bryan Lay. Bryan, super happy to have you here. Bryan is in.
I am currently in near Seattle in Washington State, United
Mhm.
States.
So yeah, I don't. Did you have snow right now?
No snow. It's mostly rain, as you'd expect for our kind of weather. But largely, I think it's a little cold. It's colder than it should be. We have questions about that a bit for the climate,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's a little cold.
Here in Montreal, it's snowing a little bit. We have a little over a foot of snow, going to maybe a foot and a half. So it's different, but at home I'm fine here in my Papa PhD headquarters. Shanaz, thank you so much. Sanaz, thank you so much for saying that everything's fine. Um, and if everything is fine, then we can go on with this interview and this great conversation about Brian Lay's story from PhD, and he'll tell a little bit more about that. To then building a profile and a career for himself in consulting. Um, if you are on Twitter, if you are on Facebook, please join us on YouTube, on the YouTube channel of Papa PhD, or on LinkedIn, which is where the full extent of the live will be, and then will also be replayed. But I will close the feeds on Facebook and Twitter now. So do come meet us on LinkedIn. I see there's a bunch of people already on LinkedIn saying hi. And if you are on LinkedIn and Twitter and YouTube, you can comment, and we will see the comments here on my console, and we'll be able to bring them on the screen and answer during the live. So again, I'm going to close the feed on Twitter, close it on Facebook. Come meet us on the YouTube channel for Papa PhD, or on LinkedIn on my profile, David Mendez. So I'll do that quickly. There we go. Save, and same thing for Facebook. There we go. All right. Thanks to everyone who's watching and commenting. This helps me a lot because people don't know, but when we are on the live, I don't have feedback, my own feedback. So it can happen that there's some either artifact or level issue, and I'm not aware of it until the end of the episode. That's why now I do this little call to action in the beginning. So again, thanks Sanaz for having confirmed that everything's fine. So Brian, I don't know if you've watched one of these. So this is a live recording. It's going to stay on YouTube. It's going to stay
Hey,
and extract the audio and then create the podcast episode, uh, just the audio version of the episode later on. So it's kind of so I'm covering people who are more visual and the people who are more auditive and more like inclined to listening.
got it.
All right. So what I'll do is I'll just pause for a couple of seconds, give the intro, and then share with people your quick bio, and then I'll let you talk a little bit more about yourself.
Perfect. Sounds good.
Welcome to this week's episode of Papa PhD. This week, I have the great pleasure of having with me Bryan Lay, PhD. Bryan is a food scientist, food industry consultant, and author of 150 Food Science Questions Answered. He earned his PhD in food science from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where he studied the chemistry of savory flavors from plant-based sources. He is currently a research scholar through the Ronin Institute for Independent Scholarship an industry expert for Carbon 13, a venture builder based in the UK, and an independent consultant for Mycelium Gastronomy, an industry network of food experts. Welcome to Papa PhD, Brian.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I'm looking forward to sharing more about my story. Yeah.
Yeah, and like you said, sharing your story is kind of the concept of Papa PhD. We were talking before recording how I think, it is important, or stories are naturally and organically the medium that gets people engaged with the narrative, and to keep like lessons learned, or take home messages. And that's why I'm super happy to have people like you come here week after week and share their stories of how, how their PhD went, how the transition, what happened just after the PhD, and then how they built a career after. And yeah, that's why we're here. So, based on what I said, which was very quick and summarized, can you tell us a little bit more, one or two things about who is Brian Lay?
Yeah. For me, I think a lot of it has been, I have this really great love for food. And especially after I met my wife, or who ended up becoming my wife, we have this sort of passion for everything food. And I think that has driven me as very far. I'm really glad that I was able to make this transition in my life, because I get to deal with so many different things. Because I started off studying chemistry, and I made a transition somewhere, in my 20s, where I was slated to go and do a PhD in chemistry,
Mhm.
pharmaceuticals and, organometallics and that sort of thing, very specific organic
Okay.
chemistry work. And then I said, I really do think food is really important for the future. And that transition point kind of took me all the way here. And I'm so grateful that I made that decision way
Mhm.
back when.
True. It's interesting. My partner is she is very keen and aware about all things to do with climate change, and I through her I learned how a lot of what can be done in in every home that can impact that is has to do with food. And it's interesting that you say that, because I think probably there's some impact of what you do that can eventually lead to lowering the impact of the food industry. But that's not why we're here. I just found it interesting that you mentioned, we think of food as something we eat to maybe, taste it and feel happy, but also help us grow when we're young, or just maintain ourselves. But there's more. There's much more to food than that. It's culture. It's an industry too. And
Hmm.
it's for sure the link from chemistry to food is a logical one to me. And it's an interesting domain, much more than we could think, if we're just thinking of what's on our plate.
Yes, absolutely.
So yeah, Brian, so uh you did, so you just mentioned this transition, which I think again is a logical one, from studying chemistry uh, to getting implicated in the domain of food. But one of the things that I always keep in mind when I'm having these conversations is the people listening, and the people who are, let's say, still in grad school, who are at the end or just after grad school. And the first thing I'd like to start with is, how did that go with you? Those last few months of the PhD, and then first few months after the PhD, the reflections, the questioning, maybe the conversations you had with your supervisor, et cetera, et cetera. How did that go?
So it's very fascinating. Basically, I think it was a lot. It was a bit of a perfect storm for many different situations, because I ended up graduating in the middle of the pandemic. So I did my
Okay.
dissertation defense over Zoom. That was and my
Oh,
advisor, he was actually about to retire, so he wasn't exactly 100% present. And it
Mm-hmm.
creates some challenges for that transition point. So I think at some point in the end of the last year, I it became clear that I wasn't moving down an academic path, and I wasn't going to move forward in that direction. So I basically was trying to figure out a way to make it work in those last few months. My wife and we ended up moving back into our parents' house, which was really weird, being,
Yeah.
in your late 20s, early 30s and living at home. I was not expecting that. And I think because of the challenges of the pandemic, I didn't have anything lined up as far as job opportunities. But what I did have was about 2 or 3 years of experience during graduate school, where I was doing some short-term consulting as well as volunteering. And I'm so
Okay.
glad I did that. At the time, I only did it because I was getting a little bogged down. In the middle of your PhD, you kind of get this slump. So I wanted to find other ways to sort of build up my interest in um, non-academic projects, including I did a lot of writing for a nonprofit. I also was doing writing for um, investment newsletters in biotechnology, and those experiences gave me a little bit of an insight of, there's life outside of the PhD domain. But going back to the
Mm-hmm.
last few months, so I I graduated. It was unceremonious because of the
Of
situation
course,
at
yeah.
the time, and we moved from Wisconsin back to California, and at some point my wife kind of nudged me and was like, "Hey, what are you going to be doing? I mean, what's the
Mhm.
situation?" And at the time I had a few projects going, but I was a little concerned because I wasn't sure if I could make a full-time career out of consulting
Mhm.
and writing. But I just published my book. So I graduated August 2020, and my book was published July 21st. So there was this window of
Okay.
opportunity where I was able to leverage my book, and I sent it to a number of different companies, and I introduced myself largely through my book as someone that could write about the topic of food science. And that, you know, I did a lot of cold emailing, especially to startup companies in the food industry space. And eventually I got very lucky. Um, I landed one client that became a long-term client. It's
Wow.
the name is Turtle Tree. Make um, they make breast milk, or actually no, they changed that. They make milk components for nutrition, but they use
Okay.
cellular
Okay.
agriculture to produce them and precision fermentation to produce their products. So I was able to do some
Hmm.
technical writing for them, and especially for their blog. And I'm so grateful to be able to do that because they gave me sort of a recurring income over that year. And that gave me a starting point to search out for other projects. And so that really started my whole journey as far as consulting.
Mhm. That's super, super, super interesting. And now it kind of makes me want to go back a little bit more because one of the issues that I see people having, and that I had myself during that last year of graduate school, or those final years, is time. And I'm wondering how how strategic, what strategic way you found to include having these activities of doing some writing, doing some volunteering, which I think is a really cool thing to do, if you find a way to do it while you're in graduate school, and if you have a scholarship. But I'd love to hear you about time management, and strategically adding something more to your day to day as a graduate student that then pays dividends years later.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could say in hindsight there was strategy involved as far as my, hey, if you look at it on paper, it looks really great, but at the time it
Hmm.
was very, very much on a whim. I think uh, I've tried,
Hmm.
it was year 2 or 3, and I wasn't making a whole lot of progress in my research day to day. And I was getting concerned
Hmm.
about the fact that, potentially what would happen if I had this degree, but I didn't have any marketable skills. And I think that came out of my previous experiences before my PhD, where I dabbled a little bit in entrepreneurship. I learned a little bit about marketing.
Okay.
I had all these sort of side hobbies that I sort of leveraged in my plan, so to speak. But essentially,
Hmm.
at the time I was thinking, well, what can I do that would boost my resume in a marketable fashion, but doing something that I could do at my desk, right? Like I was already thinking in terms of what could I do remotely, and this opportunity to write for Science Meets Food, which is the blog uh, through the Institute of Food Technologists Student Association, came up because I was reading a lot about it, and I was very interested because there's graduate students coming together and writing blog posts about the
Hmm.
science of food, right? So I thought that was super interesting, and I realized that because it was asynchronous, I could write it on my own time, and it was at the time.
Hmm.
I would I'd be doing an experiment, and there's downtime. I would do a little bit here and there as far as the writing, and then if I was at home, sometimes I'd read things to sort of get my mind um, you know interested in a lot of different things. And I really found my voice in that. I found my niche, so to speak. And I learned that
Hmm.
I really enjoyed writing, which was surprising to me because I'm not growing in high school, I was a terrible writer. I think English was one of my worst classes. And,
Hmm.
I don't think anyone ever told me I was a writer. Right. So it was very fantastic to get that experience because you never know, right? Like those things when you're
Yeah.
older. Um, and after about a year or two, I got the opportunity to actually lead that volunteer group, that program, and that gave me
Wow.
access into a lot of the metrics, which for me was really
Okay.
critical because that allowed me to actually optimize not only my colleagues' articles but also my own, and I learned a lot
Hmm.
about what people like to read. And that sort of became
Hmm.
my a little bit of an obsession of mine during you know the year before I graduated, and it was great because it allowed me to have a little bit of downtime. I think it's funny because you know as PhDs we're kind of expected to always be working in some way, and that's
Exactly.
just the nature of it. And I think for me, I always lead by what I enjoy, which doesn't always work out. Um, I think I was starting to get, some issues with my PhD research because I was devoting my time to all these other things. But I knew, I had this intuition that if I needed to have these things under my belt, otherwise,
Hmm.
publishing 3 papers wasn't going to get me a job. I mean, I just knew that.
Hmm.
I needed to have these marketable skills. So, you know, I leverage all these articles, and I created this like consistent schedule, and I was very I was very hardline with leading this group, and it actually paid off because through sheer serendipity, some book publisher reached out to me, and because my name was on that
Oh,
blog,
wow.
because I was the guy that was on top. They wanted me to write a book on food science. They read my
That
articles,
is
and
so cool.
it was so cool. That was the December of 2019. So right before, everything went down, got locked down. And I
Hmm.
I sat with my wife and I said, "Hey, I have this opportunity. Like, what are we going to do?" And I'm really grateful that she was so on board with it because she's a very practical person. She
Hmm.
thought that my PhD was like completely insane, because
Hmm.
she was seeing how much I was working, and it didn't make any sense as far as investment in time and energy. Um, but she was very supportive, and she said, "Brian, when are you going to ever get another opportunity to write a book?" And I
Yeah,
said,
it's true.
if for some reason I do this and it takes me off track of the PhD, at least I gave it a shot. So I wrote my book
Yeah.
while I was writing my dissertation. And I can't tell you how much
Wow.
I don't know how I did it. Honestly, like I really wish I could say I was very strict and disciplined. I was not. I think I even took my holiday week and I just wrote every single day, and I spent 2 months writing the
Hmm.
book,
Hmm.
and it was really crazy. I'm glad I did, though, because that was, like I said,
Of course.
kind of the foundation for my next stage in my life
Yeah.
after PhD.
No, yeah, I can see how having that side project while you were writing your dissertation might have even given you fuel, or given, especially that you mentioned that your thesis was not, you weren't so satisfied at how it was going, gave you some respite, and it gave you kind of a bubble of, this is something I'm passionate about. And even though it's work, it might have even energized you to then do the writing of your thesis, which you had to do to finish anyway. I can totally see that. But it's a great story. It's really, really cool. And of course there's serendipity in there, like you said. But if you hadn't started 2 years before, this little thing of starting to write for a blog, this wouldn't have happened. So there's also work there. There's also 2 years of building yourself up, of discovering
Yes,
you liked writing about that subject, which is a great a great thing. When you start a project and you start liking it, you discover things about yourself. And that one is a big one. I can write, and people, and now I can learn how to write better, and now I can see how people are reacting to what I write. It's really, really great, and it's an incremental thing. And I'm saying this because I don't think people should think, okay, now I should write a book to to prepare for my career after the PhD. But starting something small, I think, is the key. And trying one, maybe if it doesn't work, if you don't like it, try another one, and eventually there's some small thing that you can insert into your daily routine, and that you can feel good about. Yes, I'm doing my PhD, but I'm watering this little seed here day by day, and just do that like a gardener. And 2 years later something grew out of that. And then, well, in your case, it's quite a quite a turning point. But I really, really like the story, and I really, really like the how organic it seems that it all happened. The other thing I like is that I find that often PhDs can be isolating, and by doing this, by taking part in this other thing, that there's a group of people, that there's other graduate students probably around the world or around the country. You also had a community, a different community than your day to day lab one that you were involved with. Do you agree? Is it something that you experienced?
absolutely. I mean, I have to tell you, I was the only graduate student in my lab. At I,
Okay.
literally maybe only 2 or 3 years of that, I had one postdoc in the lab, so
Hmm.
I was literally by myself.
Okay.
And you're absolutely right. I was able to connect with a larger group, a larger community of people who are in my field, who are seeking professional opportunities, and that gave me a lot of cross fertilization for ideas. And I got to see
Hmm.
what people were doing after their PhD. I got to see what people were up to in terms of, how they leveraged that. And it gave me a lot of examples as far as what I could potentially do with the degree. And I would say that
Hmm.
that helped so much, because otherwise I would have sat there thinking like, why, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? Um, which you kind of get kind of bogged down into, especially if you don't have a clear career path, which for me
Hmm.
was the case, unfortunately.
Yeah. Now, in our conversations before today, because I'm thinking of what came next, right? So you have this book. This book kind of opens the door to this first client, and which became a long-term client, which is always when you launch as a solopreneur, you want to have these like solid relationships. But one thing that often I think stops people from allowing themselves to imagine themselves pivoting to something else is what people say around them. Uh, and I remember you mentioning something to that respect in our conversations before. Do you remember, um, looking back, people having conversations, kind of saying, "This is it's so hard to get into this domain," or "What are you doing? You've invested all this time, and now you're not even sure what you can do in this domain, or if you can even pierce and have a presence and have a career in this domain of consulting." I'd love to have your kind of your look back at those conversations, and then your kind of analysis of how they might have been wrong or skewed based on who was giving you that feedback.
Yeah, it's really fascinating because so I have on one end, so my mom is a bit of an entrepreneur. She's a businesswoman. She started a number of different businesses in her life, very different industries, medical, clothing, retail, very
Yep.
successful. Um, and I look up to her as someone that provides business advice. And unfortunately, what she gave me as far as insight, the it kind of, she said something along the lines as like, it doesn't make any sense what you're trying to do, right? Like you won't be able to do it because you don't have any like way of interacting with people. And I think she was coming from a place of a brick and mortar business, right? I don't think she
Mhm,
understood
mhm.
how the internet worked. And for me, because I had this experience with this volunteer group where I was doing their social media, I was doing their online blogging, and so on and so forth, I started to get more insight into how I could potentially reach out to clients. And that became a sticking point because I talked to my sister,
Mhm.
who's now consulting in sort of the urban planning space. I talked to an old colleague of
Okay.
mine who is a professor and also consulted on the side. And then I talked to my parents-in-law, who were very down to earth, practical people, and I think a lot of people were saying, we don't think it's going to work necessarily, or you may have to
Mhm.
leverage to a full time position. And that was true of my wife as well. And I think for her it made sense. She had a lot of skin in the game, so to speak. But
Of course.
bless her, because she definitely also said, I'll give you a year. I'll give you a year. And I'm really grateful
Mhm,
for she
mhm.
did, because without her support, I think I would have definitely faltered a little bit. But as far as the misconceptions, I think a lot of it was like, how are you even going to do this? Like, most businesses fail. What are you even going to consult about? Like, there was a lot of these question marks that I couldn't even answer. I think that was what made it really challenging, is I didn't have answers for these because I didn't have any experience doing anything. And that's one of those
Mm.
challenges I think that a lot of people face, is if you're around people who don't have these experiences, their viewpoint is biased. Their worldview is
Mhm.
skewed. So they're not necessarily going to provide you the best ideas. Not to say I completely disregarded what they said. I knew that there was a risk, but
Mhm.
I was looking for ways to reduce that risk. And I had these experiences in my past, early 20s, where I was trying to figure out different ways to market, different ways to reach out to people. And I'm really glad I had those experiences when I was younger, because
Mhm.
I used
Yeah.
those to kind of give myself a foundation of, yeah, there are ways to reach out to people online. Like, the internet has changed the game as far as you know what you can do. I think that was
Mhm.
something that a lot of people didn't necessarily understand, that were around me. I
Yeah.
think that was the one thing that gave me a bit of an advantage because I grew up with the internet. I used to do a lot of online gaming. I did a lot of like community work online. I'm very much involved in
Okay.
virtual space, and I think because of the pandemic, everything switching to remote became an open field
Yeah,
for me
that's
because I
true.
was like, I know what
That's true.
Slack is. I know what that is. It's a chat room. I know, how these processes work where you can get a landing page. Like I had all these things in my head, and it was perfect because I at least had that
Mhm,
expertise and I
mhm.
knew that it was possible because I had examples of people who had done it in other fields, not in necessarily in a scientific field. That was a little bit of a big question mark was how was I going to connect with
Yeah.
people in the food industry? And for most people in my industry, they all work in person. And I met so many
Mhm,
people,
mhm.
even online, who were telling me like, oh, you get consulting involves being in person. But again,
Yeah.
pandemic changed the game on that. And I became
Of course. No,
the
that's
one
super
guy
interesting.
who could do that.
That's really, really interesting, and I do think that, yeah, the pandemic and those 2 years changed the game for a lot of people, for a lot of organizations, and I think some of those things will stick. Some of that opening to being reached out to on, let's say, LinkedIn or just virtually, versus some more traditional ways of doing it in the past. I think that'll stick for the time coming. And but now thinking, so you had all these people kind of telling you, not sure. Your partner, and yeah, I can understand how you're grateful to her, said, okay, I'll give you a year, and that's very, very generous. That has been very generous of her. But so, for someone, imagine, that's in your situation, might or be or not in a couple, but that has this 6 months, a year, to try to establish this network, because that's what you need, right, to establish your presence, but then get in touch with key people in different or entities, organizations that are important to you. What was, let's say, what's a good game plan, what's a good blueprint to follow, if you just graduated, you're trying to scramble, and you have this idea, you have this project, you may even have some, like, market study about it, but you need to be able to start having these conversations and start being part of the conversation. How did you go about doing that?
Yeah, definitely. I started to understand that there's a lot of different processes and they take a lot of time. But the one thing I knew that absolutely would be the difference between 0 and 1, that sort of like transition point, was
Mhm.
reaching out and emailing people directly. And it was a risk.
Okay.
And I knew that. And for me, it was part of it was kind of being pushed against a wall in a sense. And I said, if
Of course.
yeah, I'm going to fail, I might as well fail big, and I might as well go and reach out to people directly. So, I made this massive list of CEOs, investors, founders, and I just emailed them direct. And I knew so many people who said like it's not going to work. Like I don't know why you think that they're going to spend any time talking to you, which I thought was really funny because it's not like I necessarily knew that would be the case.
Mhm.
But I think I read somewhere. I think Steve Jobs had this quote, but I'm sure a lot of other people have something similar, which is that you might as well reach out to people for help, or you might as well reach out to people for to have discussions, because what's the worst that can happen, right? And I think the biggest thing I learned from that was, one, um, I learned to be rejected a lot, right? And it's
Yes.
there's 90% of the time people aren't going to respond. 5% of the time people are going to respond and say like they just don't. There's nothing for me. And then
Yeah.
you get maybe 3 or 4% that's like tentative. But if you get that one out of 100, that's like, I have a deal for you. I have a way that you can add value. And really, it's on you to discuss to find that in yourself is like, how can I add value to this person's company? That's all you need.
Hmm.
And I think that that became really important for my learning lesson as far as that beginning point, which was you don't have a whole lot to lose. I think I gave
No,
myself
that's
a lot
true.
of these excuses to not do it. Right? I was like, oh, like people are gonna think I'm weird. I'm gonna be blacklisted. Like, like it's gonna look like spam. But I really worked hard on it because I optimized everything. I learned how to optimize my email. I
Hmm.
learned how to optimize my conversations. I optimized like the discussion part, and it's crazy because every time you make some kind of mistake, I think that's a huge learning opportunity. And I think that to me
Yeah.
was you're kind of walking in blind in a sense. You're in a room, it's dark, and you're trying to feel everything. And I think every time you don't feel something, that also means you're getting closer. You're going to feel something, right? So that to me became my benchmark of experience because no one else was ever going to teach me that. No one else was going to tell me that because they didn't
Hmm.
have that experience. They didn't know. Um, that's something that
Hmm.
you can do, and I think that's yeah. I would say you're going to try a lot of different things, but honestly, you have to go for efficiency, and you have to be very like
Yeah.
diligent about it. And I think, and you have to be willing to fail and fail very large, very big. Otherwise, I think you're not going to make
Hmm.
very much progress in that first year. That was my learning
Hmm.
lesson.
I love your image of being in a dark room and trying to feel your way. It's really telling. I really like how it works with the example you're giving, and I really love also this idea of failing is learning. So you built this list, like you said, like 3%, say 5% say maybe, 3% say let's talk, and then eventually 1%. But with those 98% or 99%, they taught each conversation taught you something that you could bring to the next one. And I do think that if you uh, have this ease, let's say, to engage in these conversations with people you don't know, that might be daunting to you to talk because they're like CEO of something. Because some people might have an issue or like difficulty or an introversion, but if you're able to go past that, you will learn a lot, and I imagine also a lot about you, because these conversations, there you can get very vulnerable by putting yourself out there with someone who's built a business, and maybe gives you 5 minutes of their time to see if if what you have to say is interesting or not. And this vulnerability and this it's kind of a leap of faith, right? Of, I believe in this project. Let's talk to another person. It didn't work. What didn't work? Okay, let's see if I can fix this next time. Let's talk to another person. And anyway, I really really like that you mentioned that, because it could, by looking at what you do today and where you are, it might be easy to imagine, oh, he talked to someone and then it worked. And but no, you talked to a lot of people. A lot of them said no. A lot of them said sorry, not now, not today. But some of them, eventually it clicked, and that, of course, then you learn even more with those smaller first connections that you
Yes.
can always bring later on. So how long did it take, let's say, to you, did that year, was that year that you were given enough to get into kind of a cruise control of starting your offering your services?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that year was it really opened my eyes as far as what was possible because I was very open to anything really, and I think somehow there's a mindset change that came during it, which
Mm,
was initially you feel like you're trying to get something from someone, right? That you're trying to get work from someone,
yeah.
and then you almost have to assume this role. And it starts with sort of engaging with yourself and being very
Yeah.
honest with who you are and what your skills are and what you can offer to the table. And I really dug deep and I said, like, what is it that's unique about me? What and I like what you said about being vulnerable. It was really a question of like, how can I be authentic and vulnerable in this space? And it's funny to say that and sort of, well, we think of business as being very stuffy, but I think for me it was as I shed a lot of my misconceptions, I was also gaining this ability to connect very, very deeply with people. And as I did
Hmm.
that, that year became like I felt this sort of increase in abundance, right? It was this feeling of there's an
Hmm.
abundance here of not just opportunity, but also of social capital, of um, possibility. I think there was a lot of hope. And that's not to say that there weren't, plenty of downs and question marks. But I think those were kind of surface level. The doubts became surface level, and there was
Hmm.
more. There's some part where I could rest, which was really exciting. I think
Yep.
that's that clicking point where I was like, oh my gosh, like, and it became this moment of finally I could say like I'm not necessarily going to listen to what other people say. That isn't to say I'm not going to take advice and consider it, but there was this moment of everything. I'm the person in the driver's seat, right? I'm the one who has
Yeah.
to learn how to drive this car, this vehicle, that no one else
You have
is.
this inner compass that is now guiding you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I would say that,
I love it.
yeah, it was amazing. To have that, I think that's the game changer because not
Hmm.
to say that having a full-time position or career is different, but I don't personally think I would have learned that sort of self-sufficiency if I had gone down a more
Hmm.
conventional or traditional path. And I'm so grateful for it
Hmm.
because now, you know, now I'm in year 3 of my consulting, and I I'm just sitting here and people come to me and I didn't know that was even possible, right? I started building all these systems, right, in the first year, and I didn't know if they were going to work. I had no idea, right? Like that's one of those things you put in a seed and you don't know what kind of plant is going to come out, whether it's going to be,
Yeah.
a stink flower or a beautiful peach tree. Um, and certainly many things died along the way, but the things that survived, and
Of course.
luckily they did survive, became sort of the pipeline for a lot of opportunity. Which, to me, I've been able to work with people. I've been working with companies that I never even thought I could have access to. Never. I
Mm.
thought I need like 5-10 years in corporate career. I need to make a name myself. And a lot of people were saying things along those lines. I think that was the other piece
Huh.
was I had these messages from society about what could and could not be possible. And I really had to shed that. And it's fantastic. It's really scary because it's all on me to do everything. But at the
Yeah.
same time,
Yeah.
if I have to start over, I know how to do it. And it's kind of like that same process, the analogy of being in the dark. Someone can hold
Hmm.
your hand and guide you, but that doesn't give you the skills to guide yourself. I think that's the one of the pieces. I can ski down the slope, so to speak, because I know how to stand on my own
Yeah.
feet.
Yeah. No, no, it makes a lot of sense. And it kind of also aligns with that thing that I was saying at the beginning of when you started that writing a little bit on the side during your PhD, and then it grew to something else. Once you have a project, let's say a business project, it's also something that grows. Like you said, there's some pruning that happens. Some parts of the plant rot and fall off, but eventually you learn, and you, especially when you're a solopreneur, you grow with it. But
Hmm.
now, because we did mention consulting, and some people listening or watching might want info about that, I have some actually a couple questions before we finish, because it's been a great conversation, and I just see that time is flying so fast. But what would you say, so you had all these conversations. Some of them were just you sending an email and receiving a no or no answer. Some of them were actually exchanges, and you said you have some kind of lessons learned of all of that allowed you to then get you where you are today. When someone is, you did your research in a domain, you feel you have this capacity to help organizations with what you learned, turning the question not on you as a potential consultant, but on people you've worked with, organizations you've worked with. What would you say are things organizations are looking for in someone presenting themselves as, hey, I think I can help you with this type of project. Can you please give me some of your time to explain how? What are they looking for?
Yeah, I think ultimately what value is saving someone. It's probably three possibilities. One is to save someone's time, right? So you do work that, for me, in my example, I do a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of research. I do a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of understanding ingredients. And it's not that these people can't do it. They can do it. They're very smart people. It's just that it's not worth their time. So what you are in that position is someone that's saving someone time. And if you can be that person and save them time at a value that the cost isn't going to exceed their budget, that's kind of the mindset you kind of have to be at for that to work out. The other piece is can you be a person that makes this company more money, right? That's the other thing. How can you provide something that increases the value or output of that company? And again, in my example, like I could be designing a formulation of a product that takes that business or company into a new direction, and is something that they can sell in the market, or maybe they found a way to produce a new technology, and they want me to develop some part of it, and that's again a new market opportunity. And then the third way is saving money. If I can figure out processes, or reduce ingredients, or find a way to reduce costs in some fashion, that indirectly allows a company to make more money, right? So those are the kind of three things that they're looking for in terms of, and you make all your processes streamlined for that, right? So making sure that they don't feel at any point in the conversation like they're going to lose money, lose time, so on and so forth. I think that's the key piece of how I personally engage in my mindset, and trying to be in the shoes of that person that's providing me money, because ultimately what they're trying to do is they're getting their investment back. I'm an investment, right? They're investing, some amount of money, and they're hoping to get a return of something that will in the downstream will provide them additional funds. And I think it's very interesting when I work with startups in that capacity, because it's my impact is much more relevant and very direct. So I can actually see, for example, if I help a company design a formulation, or create a white paper content, that material is going to go directly to an investor, who then is able to write a check for some amount of money. And to me, it's like, wow, I became involved in that, and to me that's actually really a valuable experience, because then I can see, okay, so I'm worth this much, in a sense. Like I can tell myself, I'm part of this machine that was worth X amount, and that gives me so much more confidence than saying like, okay, I worked for this giant company and my impact was minimal, right? Like I got paid, but I have no idea what I did in the grand scheme of things. So
all right, so be very conscious and intentional about communicating what value added you are going to bring. And like you said, time, innovation, and money, that's the three axes that I found. And coming from academia and from research, they totally make sense, the three of them. Super interesting. Now, thinking of the same person who is has this idea, this project, and who's maybe fearful of doing, a faux pas of some kind. Do you have like kind of a, not a CV of failures, because it might be too long, but can you have like one or two stories of things you did in the beginning and that you really learned quite fast? Okay, this is a no. I should, this is in this industry or with these type of clients, this is something I can never do again.
Yeah, wow. Definitely don't put all your eggs in one basket, because people,
Okay.
people change their minds. People have different interests. Oh my gosh. If you're working with a large group where there's a lot of people involved, that gets really complicated. It's like a giant hive mind. Like, you have no idea where that's going to go.
Hmm.
So don't even for 1 second think that anything is a guarantee, right? What I
Hmm.
like to do
Hmm.
now, and I realize this a little bit late. There's some mistakes here, but definitely get paid first, like before you do anything, like,
Hmm.
because you have no idea what a person is thinking, what their needs are. And some people just forget, right? Like, that's actually more. It's not malicious. It's not like people are trying to get work out of you. There are people who are trying to get work out of you for free, and you have to watch
Hmm.
out for those people. There's no. I think I did one trial project, and it was horrible because I never got paid for it, and there was no recourse, and there was nothing I could add to my
Hmm.
project of things I did. So I was like, wow, why did I do this? But
Oh my.
so you don't want to do that. But to get paid first, people change their minds. Um, and then, gosh, I think there was definitely moments where I think I tried to deliver more than I could for myself, and I burned myself out a little bit.
Hmm.
I I think there is something to be said about valuing your own time and being okay with
Yeah.
the fact that as human beings, we're not on all the time, and you need rest. And I'm really
Hmm.
grateful
Hmm.
again. My wife, I keep bringing her up. She seems to, come into the conversation all the time because she is very important to me. Um, but she is always emphasizing the need to rest, I think. And, there are definitely times
Hmm.
when I said, no, I need to get this project done. It was never worth it. That to me is
Hmm.
really important lesson, because um, I'd come out of it just, I might have completed it, I might have done it, but just not feeling my full 100%. And if I can't be 100%
Hmm.
for this kind of work, I feel like it's not worth it, because I can go to a company, I can go and get a full time position, and that money is not really the object here. A lot of it is, am I creating a lifestyle that's important for me? Am I creating
Hmm.
a way of life that allows me to do the things that I love, with the people that I love? Um, which isn't to say that I
Hmm.
don't love the work that I do. I absolutely love it. But I think the day that I say this is more of a drag than it is a passion, I think I need to stop,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
it's not it's the administration, the like logistics, like the fact that I have to do my own finances, and my own taxes, like all these
Yeah,
overhead. That's the other thing, is that um, I would say half my time is all the administration, and half of it is actual work where
of
I'm sitting
course.
down and producing something.
Of
I'm so
course.
surprised by the amount of time that I spend marketing. I spend, looking through my financial statements, which luckily I actually really enjoy. I love looking at the numbers, and,
Hmm.
and those are really great metrics. But it does take it out of you if that's really all you're doing. So I think you do have to
Yeah,
find a little
and
bit of,
like in grad school,
yeah, like in grad
of
school.
balance. Like in grad school, and it's
Yes.
funny, and we're getting really to the end of the interview, but I want to, I want to come kind of pick up something you said, which is, and which I think is really crucial for people in grad school and just after graduating, which is the being able to allow yourself to value your time. And I think, and in my experience, the culture of graduate school, of being a graduate researcher, a graduate student, does not naturally lead you to value your time a lot.
Yes.
I think
Yeah.
it's the opposite.
Yes.
You give all of your time if possible, and for the cause.
Yeah.
And I can see how there's something rings true in that, in a certain aspect, because we're not in a commercial endeavor when we're in academia and in graduate school. But everyone needs to live, everyone needs to pay bills, everyone has overhead expenses, like you
Yeah.
said. And that is another thing that can be challenging for people coming out of academia and of graduate school, allowing yourself to say, my time and is worth this much, and my time is my heartbeats, is my breath, is my living, is it's my family. And I do feel, talking with people, that it's a challenge, especially when you come out young out of graduate school. And it does have the danger of hindering people, let's say for people who are going for an employee career, in not negotiating their salary well enough at the beginning, and then not having the compound effects of having a good salary negotiation at the beginning. So I just wanted to make this point, how important what you said is, in particular for people coming out of graduate school. I don't know if you agree. It's just a feeling that I got based on what you said.
I mean, 100%. Well, at the end of the day, no one is looking out for you except yourself. And I don't, it sounds very, free market. But I think when it comes to money, um, maybe not in other endeavors or spaces, but money is one of those places where you have to speak up for yourself. There's no other choice. No one's going to do
Hmm.
it for you. No one hands over money to you willingly without something in return, right?
That's true. That is totally true. Brian, sadly, we're at the end of our conversation. Please, I'd love to. First, I really enjoyed talking with you, and I really think that your story is full of great examples of what to do, what not to do, but especially, and in particular, of it is possible to pivot, and it is possible to go on your own today more than 5-10 years ago. There's different ways to do it. You mentioned that you went the way of having a list of people that you email directly. I think it's a bold and brave one, and I do think that if someone is inclined and easy in approaching people of maybe authority, do it, because it's going to be worth it. The experience, you're going to learn through the experience, and you have the possibility of having great contacts afterwards. But there's other simpler ways. LinkedIn is the one that of course comes to mind, and anyone who is on LinkedIn is open to being reached out to. And um, and so I do think this this concept of saying, okay, I'm going to be my own business, and I'm going to create the network where this business happens, is the barrier is so much lower today. So take advantage of those tools, and if you have it in you, be have and if you also have, of course, the time and the and the financial ability to take some time to grow this small seed to something bigger, do it. Today's the day to do it. And 2023, you shouldn't be afraid of reaching out to people directly if you have something that will add value to their organization, to their business. It's kind of the take home message for me, and it really came through with all that you shared. But I was going to ask, Brian, if people want to find you. So for people who are on Twitter, there's Brian's handles are coming, are kind of circling at the bottom of the video here. I'm trying to, yeah, there you go, like this. His Twitter and his .com, his website. Also, the title of his book, 150 Food Science Questions Answered. But for people who are listening to the podcast, how can people reach out to you? Where can people find your content? What's the best way to learn more about Brian Lee?
Yeah, definitely the website, right? Like that, I've got everything on there. I got my Twitter, my Instagram, my YouTube, the whole gamut. So, and that's where I put all my projects in my portfolio, because it's really amazing what being able to just put yourself on a website does, it does change the game a
Hmm.
little bit.
Can you? So I'm going to share that all those links in the show notes of the episode. But can you share them live here, the URL, so people
Yes, yes,
listening
yes.
can right after listening to the episode can go and visit your
Yeah, you
website.
just go to bryanquocle.com. So that's spelled BRYANQUOCLE.com. Or if you look up, Bryan Quoc food scientist, I'm online. You'll see me on Google. So yeah.
Marvelous. Awesome. Bryan, again, this was a great conversation. Super happy to have had you here on this Papa PhD Live. And it's been inspiring. I've had a lot of fun, like hearing, because you have great energy,
Oh,
having,
thank you.
hearing your story and hearing how you look back on those years. Who some of that time might have been a bit more, grueling and not so easy, but you brought it up, all of it, with a great energy, and I think it's going to be inspiring for people watching and listening. So thank you for that. Thank you also to everyone listening. Here we have, again, Sana saying, thanks for sharing your story. Interesting. And I think this kind of summarizes my feelings too. Thanks to all of you that were watching live. Um, if you are on YouTube, please follow the channel. It's easy. You can just subscribe. There's a little bell if you want to be up to date with any new content on the channel. Papa PhD is on all podcasting platforms. So whenever this episode is going to be live as a podcast, you will find it on your favorite podcast app. Um, Papa PhD is a labor of love. It's something that I do. It's a little plant that I'm watering day after day here from my from my basement studio. So if you like what you see and what you hear here on Papa PhD and want to support me, you can go to papaphd.com/support, or you can find Papa PhD on Patreon and become a patron. Any little help will be much appreciated and will help me pay all the overheads that you were mentioning, Bryan, like hosting, gear, etc. So if you feel inclined to do that, it'll be much appreciated. As for Bryan, go to bryanquocle.com to find all his links, and I will also again share them in the show notes of the episode. Again, Bryan, thank you so much. This was a great hour with you, a great hour talking about transitions, talking about what to do, what not to do, and kind of sharing this message of, if you have kind of a solo project that's really intent on and that's really passionate about, give yourself the benefit of the doubt and try to reach out to people directly. It's possible today, and Bryan is a living proof of that. Bryan, thank you so much for having me on Papa PhD.
Thank you so much, David. It was a pleasure.